Welcome to Inside New York's Art World. I'm Barbara Lee Diamondstein, and our celebrated guests today are artist Robert Rauschenburg and his dealer, Leo Castelli.
Dealer? Friend.
Friend and dealer.
No, friend.
It's doubtful if the art of the 60s would have looked quite the way it did if Leo Castelli had not assembled his group of artists and promoted them into international prominence since he first opened his gallery 20 years ago. At just about the same time, actually 6 years earlier, Robert Rauschenburg popped into American art with his first one-man show, what was then called an eccentric and prophetic show of pictures. You had only recently arrived in New York. How did you get a show at Betty Parsons' gallery?
Well, there were so many things that were going on there that, I was a student. I don't know how sophisticated you are, but I wasn't so sophisticated. And there were so many things I didn't understand. I kept going back to the Betty Parsons Gallery for, not so much for answers as for questions. And finally, I just took a bunch of paintings up there. And because I'd reached a very serious impasse, and I just took a bunch of paintings with me and went up there and asked if I could see her. And she came out and said, "I only look at paintings on Tuesday." And this was Monday. And I said, "Well, couldn't you pretend that it was Tuesday, even though it's Monday?" And she said, "All right, okay, put them in there." It was the small room on the side. And then I'm standing there in this small room surrounded by these inferior thick creatures that I have made. And trying to figure out whether I should just flee or whether it'd be better to just stand there in this loneliness. And before I could make up my mind, she was back and she said, "Well, what are these?" And I said, "These are my works." And oh God, I'm drop dead, you know. And it's a very bad idea, lady. And then she started saying, "Well, you're showing them to me too fast. I'm trying to get out of there." And then she said, "Well, I can't give you a show until May." And I said, "I don't want a show."
You really came for her to look at the work.
I wanted her. I just wanted to, see if there was anything that I was doing that related at all to the energy in her gallery. Because I was obsessed by seeing all those works. So I had a show in May.
In the summer of 1948, you were still a student at Black Mountain College, and then came soon after that to New York, and are credited with being an enormous influence, in fact, a major conditioner of Neo-Dada among the young artists of the New York school. And I can recall a sculpture of about 2 or 3 years ago that is an homage to Duchamp as well. How heavily does he figure as an influence in your life, in your work?
I guess heavily, but later than he could be an organic, a direct influence. I mean, the first Duchamp that I ever saw was the bicycle wheel on the stool. And I saw that at the same time that I saw a sculpture by Maillot.
Where did you see that?
And there was no, in the Museum of Modern Art.
Uh-huh.
And there was absolutely no problem. There was something in there by the Japanese...
Noguchi?
Noguchi.
You knew
And so
Duchamp in that
Noguchi,
period.
Duchamp, and Maillot. And I didn't see any disparity there. There was no conflict. But I didn't know him until much later.
Leo, you knew Duchamp in that period, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Let me see. When did I meet him first? Yeah, it must have been right after I got back from the war.
Before you ever started an art gallery, Leo,
Yes.
how did that ever come about? Your first gallery?
After being in Romania for a few years, where I worked in an insurance company first, and then I did work in a bank after that. And then that bank sent me to Paris, where they had a branch. So I was there at that bank and dissatisfied as ever. And I had a friend who was a decorator who designed furniture. At that time, it was in the 30s, the furniture he designed was art, what we call now Art Deco. So one day, going by Place Vendôme, many of you must know where Place Vendôme is in Paris, we saw a storefront that was, where there was a sign that the store behind that front was for rent. And to apply at the Ritz, which was next door, to find out what the conditions would be. So the friend of mine and I, who hadn't done anything in art until then, went in and well, asked how much it would be to have that space. Oh, first we wanted to see the space, of course. We wanted to see the space, and then we asked how much it would be to rent. And so the space was just incredibly beautiful. One room after the other, all covered in velvet, you know, soft colors, chartreuse, and all that. And there were about, it was a succession of 5 marvelous rooms, something like 15 feet high, and there were windows on one side on the gardens of the Ritz. It couldn't be more beautiful. And so it turned out that the rent was very, very modest for the first 3 years. They wanted to give us a chance to make good, and then, of course, they were going to increase it very stiffly. That friend of mine and myself were very naive, very young, and immediately we were taken over by the surrealists. You see, I had a friend from way back who was from Trieste, like myself, and she was called Leonore Fini. Maybe a few of you know about her. Yeah. And she, well, when she found out that I had this marvelous space, she said, all right, now let's see what we do with this. And she, Max Ernst, Chellichev, Dali, and many others, Meret Oppenheim, who did the Fur Cup, well, decided that we had to do something very, very grand. And they designed all kinds of things, panels, furniture, and my friend did some furniture too, but that looked awful next to theirs, which was so much more imaginative.
You designed furniture?
No, Leonore Fini.
My friend, that's the one, you know. And then we opened this thing in May 1939 with an enormous bang. It was a great event. Yeah.
Well, when did you two get together?
At the first show at Betty Parsons, which was in May. And then we had, I had together with
Twerkov.
With Twerkov, with Franz Klein, with de Kooning, with Pollock and all those, we did a great show together called the 9th Street Show. And that was in May 51, right after he opened that show at Betty Parsons. That
Was he in the show?
That
Off and on.
we had something like 90 artists in the show in a band.
And each artist who came in would rehang the show.
Yeah, that was
That's
very
what I
fun.
mean.
more
off
things
and on.
change.
I mean, really, off and on.
So anyway, we had that show, and I was very disappointed. I must tell you about something the other day. I came across that announcement that we made, that Franz Klein designed. It said 9th Street on top, and it was narrow and wide, and then there were all the names of the artists.
And I wasn't on it.
And you weren't on it.
I was disappointed too.
Yeah. Because, I'll tell you why. Because I saw your
You
show.
tell me why, I'll tell you why.
I'll tell you what. The show at Betty Parsons, I saw your work for the first time, and the catalog had already been printed, and you got into the show after the catalog was printed. That's why your name isn't there.
That's
It
all
has
right.
bothered him for 2 weeks.
Yes, I can
It
live
has.
over it.
Well,
Actually,
that's how
another casual comment was taken very seriously. It was something that you said in 1963. In fact, it became a cornerstone of 1960s criticism. You were quoted by Alan Solomon in the catalog of your Jewish Museum show in 1963 as having said that painting relates to both art and life. Neither can be made. I try to act in that gap between the two.
I don't think any honest artist sets out to make art. You love art, you live art, you are art, you do art. But you're just doing something. You're doing what no one can stop you from doing. And so, it doesn't have to be art.
You're saying that art rests...
And that is your life. But you also can't make life. And so there's something in between there that, because you flirt with the idea of that it is art.
Are you saying that art painting rests more in ideas than in the painting itself?
No, I think definition of art would have to be more simple-minded than that, and it's about how much use you can make of it. Because if you try to separate the two, art can be very self-conscious and a blinding fact. But life doesn't really need it. So it's also another blinding fact.
You've talked a moment ago about surfaces, and one of the things, at least to persons such as myself, that were so significant in what is often referred to as your, quote, iconoclastic approach to art, was to rid yourself of the tyranny of a four-edged, two-dimensional surface. And the first way, at least that I know of, that you did that was by making what came to be called combines. Can you tell us the evolution of that?
It was economy.
What do you mean?
Well, it was hard enough to get materials. Most of well, I had to have this feeling before I would accept it, because there are lots of other artists who wouldn't have done that. But I was embarrassed by, during the abstract expressionist days, of sort of some kind of self-pity, self-turning over, and, you know, remorse. And I was working out of, like art still is, like my major happiness. I mean, making it. Afterwards is something else. But I used like the bed that you own.
The painting that you shared.
I didn't have anything to paint on.
And
It wasn't an idea.
I think what you're referring to is the image that you
I
shared
painted on everything else.
on the cover
If you've ever tried to collage down on a towel put a collage on a towel, it's hard. And one the interview is that at Ponza.
Yeah.
And that's on a bath towel. That was wintertime. So I didn't need a bath towel.
How did you
I didn't have water anyway.
How did you come to use the quilt on the bed, the patchwork quilt?
Well,
Same
because
way?
I lost my car. And the quilt used to be over the hood of the car to keep the radiator from freezing. And when I moved to New York and lost my car,
How did you lose it?
it wouldn't work.
Oh, I see, in that sense.
Now I think we know how you got the tires, though.
And it was there, and again it was summer. Those weren't my tires. That was my quilt.
You've said that you see yourself as a reporter, and that painting is one of the vehicles that you use to give those reports.
I'm looking for information, and I pick them up in my hands. And this is where the thoughts are.
How much of your work is autobiographical?
Probably all.
And how heavily do you rely on technology, film, photography, all sorts of technological devices?
As little as possible, but it is necessary.
Why don't we talk about the jammers for a moment? How did that happen?
Well, I was working with fabrics already, and doing transfers, and I'd been to India, and I had for years been I'd put off the idea of, I'd mostly work in trash. and the idea of like a beautiful piece of silk or a beautiful color, you know, consumed with its own vanity and all of that, you know, didn't interest me. I thought that was, and dualistically, I thought that was like the other side. And it wasn't until that my second trip to India that I realized that how that kind of excess works, no matter how small a shred you have of it, how that works into your own life to support you. So you have people wandering around in mud, starving and all that, and they have one little rag, and they look better than we do.
Was it in India
So I broke down that prejudice. It was a prejudice.
so was it there that you became involved with those limp and sensuous fabrics that have come to be known as hoarfrosts, which I think is a rather apt metaphor for frosty, silken, almost veil-like, layer upon layer, that have photos and proofs placed on the silk?
The first time I read the word was in Dante. And
Translation of Dante into English.
And
in what context was it used in Dante?
Hoarfrost is the like mock frost, but it's a warning about the change of season.
One of the things that I know about your printing is its immediacy. How do you achieve that so
By
quickly?
not making up your mind before you're going to do it. It has to be immediate if you don't know what you're doing. And you take that chance, and it's very embarrassing. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't. But you don't have the security. If you decide that, you don't have the security.
Do you plan your major pieces before you execute them?
I have discipline. I just go to work. and I work every day.
When you do a
And I
huge
never
piece,
know what I'm doing.
you work directly on the piece?
Yes.
I wonder if there's something that you'd both clarify for us. And I'm thinking about an event that took place in 1964 when Robert Rauschenburg won the top prize at the Venice Biennale amid a swirl of rumors, most of them relating, Leo, to your activities and in a gondola, as I recall. Perhaps at long last you would clarify your version of the events and your version of the events. What really
the controversy
happened?
was about the fact that it seemed to many people that we had influenced the jurors to give the prize to Bob. They couldn't believe, the Americans especially, that suddenly there was a prize here for Rauschenburg. And I just mentioned before briefly that Rauschenburg was very well known in Europe and had many adherents and supporters there. So actually it is Europe that gave him a prize, not us.
And I had to keep switching day by day, arguing with Nolan about, you want the place on the island? That's the official place. No, if you want it, Nolan, you have it.
That refers to the two locations that we had to show.
And then mine was in the console. Then says, so then the next day it'd say, why do you want the console? Okay, I want the console. And so this switch kept going around, and finally I was off the grounds. So I almost won it illegally.
Wasn't that one of the factors that
then,
tried...
because he was not on Biennale grounds, some
didn't
people,
care.
hostile people maintained that he was not entitled to have the prize because he was not on Biennale grounds. And that's the story of the so-called gondola, which was actually a big barge.
Right, so to get a few pieces over there.
You carried them over?
So again, it was the fantastic imaginative feat of Alan Solomon, who didn't want to get no for an answer. So he said, well, if the paintings have to be on the ground, he built a little something. See, the Venice Biennale pavilion is U-shaped. So there is a part which is sort of open space between the two branches of the U. So he quickly built a plastic roof over that and put a painting of all the people that were in the consulate. Each one was represented also on the Biennale grounds.
Right.
Bob, did it make a big difference in your career?
Actually,
If only
well,
psychologically?
it probably did, but it's hard to, there have been so many dirty ideas about it. Because both Leo and Ileana and Alan Solomon, that's three, can you have three in both? Suffered for a time from being, like being accused of doing something because nobody could believe that I could win, which is marvelous, and that's the response I got in America too. You know, like pick up Art News. There were only 2 art magazines then. You say, you won't believe this, but we don't know why, but, you know.
But obviously that's changed considerably. I don't know of another artist, certainly that I can think of.
Perseverance.
The whole idea.
Curiosity and perseverance.
And just to survive and endure.
Again,
Well, how do you feel?
Something that
Yes.
we had, all of us there, Ileana, myself, Alan, was total faith, you know, total enthusiasm. And that's, well,
And the
of course,
entire scene, though.
yeah.
I mean, that wasn't your
not
pet.
that we were coolly thinking, well, here's a show and maybe he'll get a prize and things like that.
You
We
might
just,
have been.
just took it for granted that
Not
he had to
really.
get that prize. We just believed in it. That was really what did it.
Okay, I didn't know that one of the ground rules was I had, if I had thought that'd be possible that I would get the Venice Biennale prize, I had a more difficult problem about the ground rules because I was over there working for Merce Cunningham in the, what's it, the Fenici.
He had a performance.
Fenice.
And you
at
knew
the time
both
at
Cunningham
the-
and Cage from your Black Mountain days. So
I
it
was
a-
working for him. Yeah, and you know, like I just
Scenery,
happened to be
costume.
on the scene and wandering around there. And one of the ground rules was that the artist had to be there.
What are you working on now?
a series of rather large pieces called either spreads or scales.
How do they?
It's my present to me. I just want to use anything that, well, the jammers were restricting, which is kind of a discipline, and you know when you need discipline and you need restraint. So I think excess is expressionless without restraint. And basically I'm excessive. So thanks to Albers and my parents and all those people who try to knock me down, I've learned restraint.
You said that one of the values of the retrospective is that it brings you up to date, and as a result you feel liberated. Is that what
Yes.
makes for the spreads?
Yes. I thought, oh wow, at least in a few key points, somebody's going to see, like all the way from there, just examples, to all the way from here. And then they can just have them. And then I can do something else, because you have the responsibility. I mean, if you know things, I mean, if you know something, you have a feeling that your information is useless unless you can share it. And I work through my work. And that's for you.
To Robert Rauschenburg and Leo Castelli. It was a very special privilege to have you here with us tonight.
This is my dealer. He doesn't.